unless you have a charging infrastructure in place, a mass adoption of EV is generally very, very difficult. Consumers cannot be portable.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You can't port the consumer.
Yes.
Right? But here, the EV user will
Yeah.
travel from one place to another place.
Right.
Discovery, then availability, that charger is up and running, and then you do the transactions. There are three things from the customer's point of view, nothing else.
Right.
Yes, we know that the infrastructure has to be first, the proceed, but it cannot proceed indefinitely.
Right. Right.
If you have a direct feedback from the CPO, which is available,
Yeah.
that will help the sector a lot.
Right.
The dynamic load balancing systems along with community charging should be the way forward for a country like India. हम यूरोप नहीं है,
Right.
जहाँ पे हर घर में पावर पॉइंट पहले से लगा हुआ है, but over a period of time, the market will ultimately consolidate.
Thank you very much, first of all, for liking the first show which I did with Mr. Narang. Thank you very much for your support. Now, what I have decided is to have a series especially focused on charging infrastructure, and I'll be recording 5 to 7 sessions and going deeper into different aspects of the charging infrastructure, and in which I'm going to talk to different stakeholders, including CPOs, charger manufacturers, policymakers, influencers, and consumers. And the overall target is to bring insights and sometimes actionable insights from the different aspects of the charging infrastructure business in India. I remember 2012-13 when I started working around these areas, and even when FAME 1 was introduced, India as a nation as well as all kind of stakeholders were debating about whether, the chicken and egg situation, what should precede, the charging infrastructure or the vehicle. That point in time, one company and someone who was very clear about it, that the charging infrastructure should precede, because we as a consumer since last 80-100 years are, accustomed for going to the petrol stations, gas stations, and, doing the job within, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes. So that kind of infrastructure is needed, and then it definitely is going to build the confidence in the consumers and eventually help EV industry to grow. And I'm glad that the same person I have on my show today. So welcome, Awadhesh Ji. Thank you very much for joining this show. Awadhesh Ji does not require any introduction. I think he is known to everyone. But Awadhesh Ji, I would like you to introduce yourself. And also, I remember, the journey of Glida in India, starting with 15 kilowatt-hour chargers and then recently introducing in Hyderabad 102 charging guns at one place. So the journey has been phenomenal. If you can talk about yourself and your journey in EV industry.
Thank you, Pritesh. You are right that when we started in 2016, at that point of time in India, we had just adopted the FAME 1. And we were talking about that, how EV can be adopted. And obviously at that point of time, it was more on the hybrid side and less on the pure battery electric vehicles. So I remember, very clearly the 30th October 2016, when I was coming along with my Finnish colleague and I landed at the Indira Gandhi airport. And this was just a day before Diwali. And we wanted to take a picture outside from the aircraft and nothing was visible, the full of smog. And incidentally, at that point of time, if you would recall, 14, 15 most polluted city of the world were lying in India.
In India, yes.
So, and since as part of Fortum, we were already doing the EV charging business since 2011 in Europe. So, since my colleague was with me, so we discussed that why can't, India has one of the largest, I would say, the automobile manufacturing setup. At that point of time, we were the 4th largest car manufacturer. And pollution is one of the major issues in the urban cities. So, why can't EV be adopted in India? And that's how we started at how we can do the EV charging infrastructure. And we were very clear from the Nordic itself, is that unless you have a charging infrastructure in place, a mass adoption of EV is generally very, very difficult. So you require a large amount of the public charging, which is reliable and spread across the country. So that gave the thought that we should start. But as you can understand, being a Finnish company coming from Europe, we don't just jump just with the idea.
Right, right.
We had the experience of how we had a struggle in the Nordic also. So we thought that, and incidentally, I come from electricity background.
Mm-hmm.
I started my journey with the Ministry of Water Resources, Set of Water Commissions, dealing with the development of the hydropower projects. And in that process, I was interacting more with the Central Electricity Authority. So I was fully aware of the electricity regulations, the power and all. And the first thing which came to my mind is that if we have to have the charging infrastructure at a larger scale, it is important that you need to have electricity to be treated differently for the EV charging infrastructure. Otherwise, so far, electricity in India is being treated purely from the consumer's point of view. It's a very highly regulated business. Whereas in the charging infrastructure, you have to democratize it.
Right.
So that was the first point we thought that, we need to do it. And obviously, we need to also understand the other regulatory landscapes which will help, rapidly develop this. So this is how we started our journey in India.
Thank you very much. So I think the journey has been enriching, and I have been following you, so I know a lot about you. So we are going to deep dive around different aspects. Awadhesh Ji has already talked about, the policy definitely has to be one of the focus areas. Then how consumers feel, how competition, investment trends, infrastructure issues, etc. We are going to deep dive around these topics. To begin with, Awadhesh Ji, I have been watching your videos and your viewpoints and following you. One thing I have noticed, you have always been talking about, in terms of the policy and regulations, that three things happened which really helped EV infrastructure, at least in India, to kind of at a place where it is now. One was GST reduction in terms of the vehicle prices. Second was delicensing of the charging infrastructure business, which enabled several players to enter in this market. And, once the competition is there, it definitely helps it. And then also you talked about, you always talk about, categorizing this industry, the consumer set, as a separate consumer itself. So these three things you always mention that has helped infrastructure to boom in India. But I think there has been other challenges also, right, in terms of the charging infrastructure business. So I want you to kind of start from beginning. What has been the favorable policies in India, and what are some of the high level challenges? Then post that we will go deeper into it.
So Pritesh, as I said, from the charging point of view or from the vehicle adoption point of view, particularly for the car, the public charging has to be there, irrespective of whether you have home charging or not. But a public charging is must when you talk of the long term, when the vehicle becomes the mainstream.
Right.
So from that point of view, charging infrastructure was very much needed. But before even the charging infrastructure happens, the regulatory framework, as I said, and that's where we started talking to the regulators, to the policy makers, is that how we can de-license it, because you should allow. And I remember I used to interact with Ministry of Power officials, and we always talk to used to give the example of the PCO. You remember, how the telecom evolved in India. It's a PCO,
right?
And PCO was de-licensed. Anybody can set up the PCO,
yes.
And at that point of time, people were queuing, and that's how.
Even in the remotest part of India, the PCOs.
So that is the concept we gave to the government, that the regulations will be such that anybody can set up the charging infrastructure, even with the one chargers. There can be 1 points, but that should be allowed. Otherwise, electricity is a licensed entity, particularly selling the electricity. That's a pure domain of the distribution companies.
Right.
So that was the beginning, and fortunately, the government listened to this.
Right.
We had to bring a lot of expertise there. I remember we had engaged with the ex-chairman of CEA, and who used to be the also member of the appellate tribunal. So he deep dived into the Electricity Act, because he was one of the members who had formed the Electricity Act 2003. And then he said that, fine, what is the consumer's definition in the Electricity Act, and how the EV charging station is different than that one? Because in the Electricity Act, if you see, consumers cannot be portable.
Yeah.
Right? You can't port the consumer.
Yes.
Right? But here, the EV user will travel from one place to another place.
Right.
So if you take the example of Delhi, people can start from BSES Yamuna jurisdictions
Right, right.
and can pass through BSES Rajdhani and go to the Tata Power DDA, right? So a consumer will port through the different jurisdictions with the same vehicle.
Right.
So ultimately, vehicle is the consumer, and we need to think from that angle that how it will be done. And that's where we brought out the concept of that the EV charging station should be a consumer, not the individual from the Electricity Act point of view.
Oh, so EV charging station
itself is a consumer. So if they become a consumer, that is fixed. So because the definition of the consumer is the fixed premise and all those kinds of things. So that's where the EV charging infrastructure comes into picture. So that's where we argued with them that it's a EV charging stations that becomes the consumer. So you de-license it. Second, you categorize this as a separate consumer. So far, it was being treated as a commercial activity.
Right, right.
I said that no, it should not be a commercial activity. It is a commercial, but it's a separate consumer. Like you have industry.
Right.
They're also doing commercial activities.
Right, right.
But they are being treated separately. So that's why it's a separate consumer itself. And this is a win-win for distribution companies because it brings additional revenue for them, right? So that's the second aspect which we argued that it should be categorized as a separate customer. And that's where I must, put on record the appreciation for the first regulator who accepted this standalone was the Hyderabad, Telangana estate regulator.
Nice.
They agreed this, that yes, we should have a separate customer category for that one. And they introduced, and they also removed the fixed price, till 2025, they will not have any fixed price. So that was the second, which was very important.
So it emerged from state level and then...
Yeah, so obviously we were working with both the state as well as center. While center was instrumental in issuing the de-licensing, but since the consumer category, this ultimately is the regulatory aspects. So any state regulator can take their call. So that's how the state of Telangana, they took these proactive steps. But the third aspect, even if you have a set up the chargers, so I'm very clear that you can keep setting up the charging infrastructure up to a certain point. Beyond that, vehicle has to come.
Yes.
So in this chicken and egg story, yes, we know that the infrastructure has to be first, the proceed, but it cannot proceed indefinitely.
Right.
Awaiting, the car OEMs will sell the car.
Right.
It has to happen. And there the GST reduction is very, very instrumental. Because if you compare the ICE GST is starting from 29%, including the cess, and goes up to 50%.
Yeah.
Whereas the electric, you have only 5%.
Right.
So this arbitrage of 24 to 45% is huge.
It's huge.
And that has given the boost to the EV manufacturers.
Right.
So these are the three, I would say, the pivotal moment, I would say, in the EV landscape in India from the regulatory point of view.
Right. I think we must appreciate the government, central as well as the state governments, especially central government accepting this 5% GST across the vehicle segment.
Yes.
Because if you look at the ICE cars, as you mentioned that there are different brackets, an engine classification as well as on the length
of the vehicles.
And I remember when GST was debated in India, everybody talked about GST means one rate, right? But eventually it was not one rate on cars, especially favor what we, because of the infrastructure we do for the small cars, and it became like more than one tier structure for GST. So that time the logic was given, right? Because it is defined on length. So how you can go beyond, length and have one rate structure on GST. So I think I must congratulate you industry players as well as the government of India for accepting this. Now, as you said, right, that vehicles should also come, I think, due to the CAFE norms and different other emission norms, etc. And the market opportunity itself, several automotive OEMs in passenger cars are bringing the products. And going forward also, they will be bringing the products. So I believe that problem may also get solved very soon. Any opinion on that?
So I would say, again, I say that India is moving more or less on the predicted line, I would say. I'm not disappointed with the rate of the growth on the vehicles, right? See, today, if you see, essentially on the EV side, particularly the car side, Pritesh, I am of the view that the real change has started happening post-COVID.
Yes.
Prior to COVID, you had only one or at max two car manufacturers.
Right.
And they were manufacturing a low voltage vehicle systems, right? Post-COVID, one of the largest manufacturers, when they started rolling out their car, on the CCS protocol.
Right.
And then others have started following the suit.
Right.
So I think post-COVID has been the time. I would consider that one. And if you see from that point of view, then it's hardly less than 3 years.
Less than 3 years.
And in 3 years, you have almost reached 2% of penetration. And this 2% is important. See, in the percentage term, it seems very small, but if you see the absolute number, as a charge point operator, we are more concerned with the numbers, right?
Right.
Now, 2% translates into almost like 100,000 cars a year.
Yes.
If the total cars sold is roughly around 4 million,
right,
then you have roughly around 1 lakh cars sold, right? That's not a small achievement.
It's a big number.
Because if you see Norway, if you take the status of Norway has a market size of 150,000. That's a total market size, annual years. And they achieved the 90%, that's equivalent to around 120,000 in a year. They took almost 10 to 12 years. And in India, you have 100,000 cars in less than 3 years.
Less than 3
right?
years.
So that's another way of looking at it. You know, if you look at. So from the charging point of view, I think that number is quite encouraging. In terms of, because we strongly believe that there are 3 things which is important from the consumer's point of view. One is the availability of the models. What the choice you have.
Right.
Then the price. And third, the infrastructure.
Right.
These are the 3 things which consumer point of view, they will look at.
Right.
Because even if you have infrastructure, but if you don't have an affordable car, people will not go for that. If you have an affordable car, but you don't have the variation,
right?
Because everybody has a different choice.
Yes.
Now, incidentally, in India, now we have all the 3. You have, I think today, we have close to around 40 odd models. Now, yesterday, Mahindra launched 2 more variants, right? So you have almost 40 odd models, and I believe that in next 1 or 2 years, you will have another 20-25. So now that's a good amount of choice, because if it's the pricing point of view, the car is available from 6 lakh rupees upfront payment to, almost 1.5 crore to 2 crore.
Yeah.
So different segment of the customers has a different options, and that is what EV adoptions requires.
Right.
So I think no one should have any, I would say, complaint from any stakeholders.
Right.
Charge point operators are putting up the charging infrastructure. Car manufacturers are doing it, and on top of that, the consumer. See, on the car personal mobility segment, government is not giving any subsidies.
Yes. No.
For the reasons best known to them.
Right.
This is contrary to what globally is happening, right? But government has their own valid reasons, must be having their own valid reasons. But despite that, consumers are picking up those vehicles.
Yeah.
So consumers must be complimented for that one also, because they have shown the interest.
Passenger car stories all
absolutely
without incentives.
Yes, so it's a real combination of pull and push.
Right.
So consumer is demanding, and now OEM is pushing the models.
Yes.
Right. So this is a good mix of pull and push. And I strongly believe why on the car segment, because it's non-supported by the subsidies.
Yes.
So it means it is organically.
Organic. It's whatever happened is organic.
Organic. Yeah. So this is likely to sustain. Unlike in other part of the world, where the subsidy, the moment the subsidy is removed or reduced, there is a drop in sales. Right.
Even in different segments in India, for example, 2-wheelers, when subsidies go down, there is a significant
drop in sales for some time.
For some time. And there is always this worry about continuing the subsidies and till what time India can continue the subsidy.
So that way I feel India has a very good track record, a very good, I would say, directionally, it is taking a very different view from the world, that personal mobility is not supported by the subsidies, and still it is moving, I would say, in a satisfactory rate. Right. Obviously, there has to be a tipping point, because you have so much of population, so much of number of cars required, that to achieve that one, you need a scale of productions also, and that takes time. But gradually, things are moving in that direction. So I don't have any complaint with the OEMs or any stakeholders on that.
Yeah, this is encouraging to see that consumers are interested.
Yes.
Companies are building the infrastructure. Product introductions are happening. At the same time, government is also cognizant about the issues, etc. And they are trying to bring the right policies, and few of the policies which you have mentioned. Awadhesh Ji, but I think the picture is not that rosy, and there are several challenges which definitely with time, with experience, with right input to the policymakers, as well as the collaboration and cooperation from industry players, India can solve is. So, when I look at the policies, let's say electricity grid code, supply code, Electricity Act 2003, open access policies, etc. The policies, when they were, fundamentally formulated, that time the charging infrastructure was not at all in their mind.
Absolutely.
And the better part is that there is a possibility of amending the different rules and regulations. So I want you to highlight, in detail, what are missing links in these policies, and what is the need of the hour, because why I'm asking this question, Awadhesh ji, is that until or unless I personally believe the right inputs are not going to the policymakers from the industry stakeholders, consumers, and all kind of people, then taking decision is also challenging. With limited inputs, if they take the decisions, then I think that is not that good for industry. So if you can highlight some of the challenges, because you have been in this domain since several years.
Yeah. So yes, clearly, as you rightly said, all our electricity codes were not written, and not only for India, across the world. When the Electricity Act was written anywhere in the world, EV was nowhere present, right?
Yeah.
So all the grid code, everything has been designed and written keeping consumer in view,
in the center,
right?
Yeah.
Now, when you have EV now, and that's the reality. So obviously, this will require certain changes on the fundamental level of the statute itself. When we begin with the Electricity Act or Supply Code or Grid, it's all fused together. So essentially, start with first, because if you want a public charging to happen, particularly if I'm talking about the heavy vehicles like the car, buses, and trucks, they would require a faster charging, because if you want to have a similar experience as fueling of the gasoline vehicles, you require to have a high capacity chargers.
Right.
Now, high capacity chargers means even a single capacity chargers would be, for the car it is 60 kilowatt, but for the buses it will be 300 kilowatt. For the trucks probably it will be 500 kilowatt or a megawatt. Now, it means you will be starting with these kind of a load at one particular point.
Yes.
Now, most of the states currently has a very small LT level.
Yes.
So, 50 kilowatt is the threshold in many states, where we are operating. We have experienced that 50 kilowatt is the kind of a norm. Now, if you have 50 kilowatt, it means you are not able to set up even a single 60 kilowatt chargers at a lesser cost.
Yes.
Because LT, see, difference in LT and HT is basically the cost.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So setting up an LT connection, secure electricity LT connection is cheaper than the HT connection, right? And in the electricity, in the EV, initial days, setting up an HT is costly.
Yeah.
So it requires more upfront capex.
Yes.
Higher OPEX, because the fixed demand charges is also associated with the HT side.
Yeah.
And you have a lesser number of vehicles.
Yeah.
So the viability of the business in the initial years gets influenced.
Yes.
So that's where the importance of the LT is important, right? Now, how would you do that one? Unless you increase the threshold.
Yeah.
So this 50 kilowatt threshold was working fine for an individual customer.
Right.
But now with the EV coming into the picture, even if you want to set up one charger, you require HT. That includes additional cost. So that's where, and this is something which doesn't require an Electricity Act to be amended.
Okay.
This is purely in the purview of the regulator.
Okay.
Right? They can probably relook at the supply code and the grid code, and they can come up with the new guidelines. Obviously, this would require investments and upgradation of the infrastructure from the distribution company's point of view. Right? They require capex to upgrade those infrastructure because. So what we are suggesting is that this 50 kilowatt threshold should be reviewed and increase it to at least 150 kilowatt.
Okay.
Incidentally,
so
Ministry of Power, Ministry of Power has also recommended, it is a recent guidelines, that should be around 150 kilowatt. Now, this is in the purview of the regulator. They have to review the supply code and the grid code, then only it will happen.
Yes.
And the good part is that some of the regulators is already taking a positive cue.
Okay.
So like Gujarat has recently amended its policy supply code, and they have increased the threshold from 100 kilowatt to 150 kilowatt.
Oh, nice.
Right? They might not be doing only for the EV, but this is keeping EV in view. And so this is the kind of amendment or the changes I am suggesting. The another thing which can be done, on the like the fixed demand charges. Now you know that the fixed demand charges is a fixed OPEX for the EV charging infrastructure. If you are setting up a high capacity charger, my fixed demand will be very high.
Yes.
And I don't have that much of consumer initially. So there the regulators collectively, because some regulators is making it currently waiving it off.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that this is required across the country.
Across the country.
This doesn't require any amendment of the act.
Mm.
This is a regulatory decisions.
Mm.
A regulator can do these decisions.
Right.
That fine, I will keep it away for next 5 years. And what we suggest that this 5 years, 2 years is not a right way of looking at it. You should see that when the utilization becomes at least 10%.
Yes.
Because 10% is the utilizations where the EV charging infrastructure is likely to become a positive, you know,
great.
the EBITDA positive or the EBIT positive.
Right. So I think
so that threshold. So this is what we expect, that the regulator should start interacting with the CPOs.
Right.
They should start treating CPO as their genuine stakeholders, not isolated consumer.
Right.
So as a CPO, if you interact, you will get these feedbacks, these problems, and then regulator will come up with, you know, all the necessary changes which is required in that.
Yeah, CPO becomes a, you know, I think one of the most important stakeholder when it comes to the you know, suggesting the policy changes.
Absolutely.
Mainly because, you know, CPO is somebody. Obviously, it's not necessary that CPO owns asset and, you know, do the can only be in the operations of it, but because they do deal with, you know, manufacturers, they also do deal with consumers. So they are more aware about on-ground challenges. And obviously, I think one of the bigger challenges are when you go to take the electricity connections, and when you plan such things, for example, let's say more than 100 charging guns at one location with variety of 50 kilowatt to, let's say, 200 kilowatt, then I think the CPOs become one of the main stakeholders, and input should be taken from them.
Yeah, so because see, this can be looked at from this point of view also. Currently, regulators are discussing with the discoms. They are always engaged with the discoms.
Yes.
So why you are engaged with the discoms? Obviously, it's regulated, but then you have to also take into account that what are the challenges they are facing on the infrastructure side.
Correct.
Now, similarly, this input you will get directly from the CPOs, because we are operating, we are setting it up. So we might be facing some challenges with the discoms also.
Right.
We are facing the challenges with we know the expectation of the customer also.
Right.
We know what government is wanting us to do, right? And that's why I'm saying that instead of picking up the informations from, you know, separate places, you have a CPO.
Right. Awadhesh Jha, I always say this, and I think I will say this again, that probably we need to have a very strong association which government can trust on to take the inputs. If I look at the journey of, you know, different associations have come in India, so many. And with time, you know, they have been doing a lot of good quality work, but nobody became like JAMA or the SIAM or the ACMAs, which are they are that kind of association. So I think you can take the lead in that kind of association. Probably that will be also one of the good
yeah. So incidentally, we have formed an associations of Indian Charge Point Operator Associations,
yes,
where we have almost all the major players, right? Is a part of that association. So we are trying to, you know, be that force which can interact with the government on as a single platform. Obviously, it will take some time because we do not have that much of the influence on the GDP. You know, when you're talking about the CIAM and others, they are contributing a lot.
Yes.
So obviously, their voice has to be heard. We are still at a very initial stage, very small number. We're not contributing much.
Right.
So people are not taking cognizance of that one. But as you rightly said, unless you take the voice, listen to the voice directly from the ground of the CPOs, you can pick up it from the OEM, you can pick it from the discounts, but that will be indirect communications. If you have a direct feedback from the CPO, which is available, that will help the sector a lot.
Right. Yeah, I mean, thank you very much for bringing these insights, Awadhesh Jha. I think it's really amazing. Some of other issues, the smaller ones, I shouldn't call them smaller ones, because if I look at the current situation of infra business in India, those things are, for current issues and challenges, really very, very important. For example, government initially talked about, you know, ceiling charges, you know, fixing the rate which CPOs can charge. I think not only in this business, but in any business, if you put a restriction on what the stakeholders can charge, sometimes, you know, kills the innovation, because then there is, as you in the beginning also talked, right, how you brought the experience from Europe and how those were useful and how government also agreed on them and some of the changes happened. So don't you think that these things are also very, very important, especially three things, the ceiling charges I talked, and government's viewpoint about, you know, equitably, as you say, always providing the land as well as focusing more on, power availability to address current or maybe next 2-3 years challenges, in addition to what you just mentioned about electricity grid codes, etc.
Yeah. So Pritesh, personally, I am, and as an association, we are very clear that capping the service fee, what we will charge to the consumer, is not going to help this sector.
Yes.
There are two reasons. One, because in the EV it is evolving, the technology is evolving, and even the charger, small chargers of a 755 kilowatt or a 11 kilowatt or a 60 kilowatt DC, 120 kilowatt DC, all has a different capex requirement. If you want to have a service fee cap, then you have to assure also the required returns also.
Right.
Normally, if you remember, before Electricity Act 2003, it was a fixed rate of returns, and the fee was capped.
Yes.
That's fine. Whatever you have done the capex, you will get these fixed returns, and that whatever the price is done. That can be one model.
Yeah.
There you are not putting a service fee cap. Then you have a regulator who assesses the actual cost, and on top of that, so it's a cost plus model.
Yeah.
That can be one model, or you leave it to the market, as you are doing in the Post-Electricity Act.
Yes.
What you are doing, you are saying that DISCOMs, that you will procure the market through auctions, means through market.
Through market.
Similarly, in the EV, either you have a cost plus or leave it to the market. Where is the need of putting a service fee cap? Because the moment you put a service fee cap, forget about the innovations. I'm talking about the the cost structure of different type of charger is different. So then you'll have to have a service fee cap for all types of chargers.
Yes.
So government has to then become a kind of they have a sitting into a judgment that find what should be the cost of 60 kilowatt charger, what should be the cost of 120 kilowatt charger, what should be the cost of 200 kilowatt charger, and should I install now or should I install later? Because the cost, the service fee is dependent upon the utilizations.
Yes.
Now today, utilization of 200 kilowatt will be much lower.
Much lower.
Now, if the utilization is low, your fee will be very high.
Very high.
So I think they should leave it to the market. Because private players, particularly, they are putting their risk capital, and market is there.
Right.
And for that matter, today, if you see in the market, you don't find normally those abnormal numbers.
Yeah.
Because if you charge that much, probably other competitors are there, so customer is going to that customer.
Yeah, I think competition will.
Yes.
I mean, the market will itself take care.
So
of
this is something which I believe the government should not do it.
Right.
And if they do it, this will send a wrong signal to the sector.
And also, it should be like consumers itself will force, right?
Yeah.
If the prices are not what they are expecting and what competition itself is kind of charging, and everybody else in competition becomes similar services, so everybody wants to have a kind of a better services. So they should have the flexibility to charge what they want to charge.
And the another dimension which people are not talking about when the government is talking about, I always say to the government that look, fine, what is the benchmark of this service fee cap? On what basis you say? So since you don't have a utilization number, so then another benchmark is fine. If you drive an ICE vehicle, then your per kilometer cost is 5 rupees.
Right.
Fine. Then service fee cap should be such where it is not more than 5 rupees per kilometer.
Yes.
Now that's another way of looking at it.
Right.
Are you willing to do that one? Because the price which you are offering now is making the people to work at 2 rupees, 2.5 rupees.
Yes.
Now you want it to 5 rupees, then service fee cap would be just double.
Yeah.
So I think this is something which you leave it to the market. Market will figure it out as per the supply and demand, and it will ultimately
market will itself take care of such things. Awadhesh ji, switching to I think consumer, as you said, consumer is again one of the most important stakeholders who will drive this market, and there has been a lot of issues if we track this industry, what consumers have been complaining about. So for example, simple issues like payment challenges, stucking the money in the wallet. Then you have, when they are reaching to the stations, sometimes they are not properly managed, they are not available. Safety, security concerns. There are so many concerns for the customer, like installing several applications, etc. Obviously, this is bound to happen, right? Because it is a beginning of the industry. So I want your opinion about what are the key challenges, what consumer faces, and how many of them are mostly solved, and what are the remaining ones on which industry is working on currently. Number one, and if in the end, if you can touch upon some of the issues which I was, when doing research, I identified that, for example, RWAs. People in Europe, there is a, you cannot deny the charging. There is a concept, right? A right to charge. But in India, RWAs wants to have control mainly because of the safety security concerns.
So coming to the consumer's perspective, obviously you rightly said that consumer look for three things. One, how do I discover the locations? Because currently the charging station has not acquired the status as the petrol stations is.
Yes.
Right. So obviously there will be one charger sitting in one corner of the cities. People might not be knowing it.
Right.
So discovery becomes very, very important. Then once you go there, then the transaction becomes very important. That should be seamless. So obviously discovery, then availability, that charger is up and running, and then you do the transactions. There are three things from the customer's point of view, nothing else.
Right.
Now, currently what is happening, because there is no unified system to discover it, every CPU has their own applications,
Yes.
right? Either themselves or they have got it white labeled. So that is one reason of having multiple applications. Second, once you go to their places, the transactions, because it's unmanned stations, CPU requires payment to be collected
Yes.
because there is no person there
Right.
to collect post transactions.
Right.
So they require some ways by which the money can come into their account. So there are two ways it can be done. Either you can use the wallet, a closed loop wallet, or you can do open loop wallet or a UPI based and other payments.
Right.
So these are the two genuine methods through which you can do the collect transactions, collect the payment. Discovery, I strongly believe, initially whatever CPOs and other EMSPs are doing, ultimately it's some navigation applications. Whosoever has the largest share of the navigation applications, ultimately they will be driving the discovery
part
on the real-time basis. So they are supposed to integrate on the real-time basis with the CPOs, and CPOs should be willing to do that one, right? Because that gives them more visibilities to their stations. So discovery navigations app will take over the discovery in times to come. Now comes to the question of the payment.
Yes.
CPU requires to secure the payment.
Right.
So yes, people should not have only the closed loop options.
Yes. Yes.
Closed loop options should be one of the ways by which I want to do this one transactions.
Right.
The CPU should allow the customer to do the transactions in whatever way you want. But you are required to give a prepaid, fair enough. But don't force them to put money into your closed loop wallet where they cannot withdraw.
Yes.
So they should offer it. And that's where, because when we started, we started with the postpaid. Postpaid means transactions completed, now you have to give the payment.
Yeah.
We had a challenge because then, people were not turning to the stations, not making the payment. Then we discussed with the different customers and we realized that closed loop wallet, which all the CPOs are offering, only way, which is probably not the right way.
Okay.
And that's why we came up with the prepaid card.
Prepaid card.
Right? With the Pine Lab, we come up with the prepaid card.
Yeah.
So that can be used anywhere at our charging station also.
Okay.
Right? So money is in that card on which you have full control. I don't have any control.
You can do the shopping and whatever.
Yes,
you want to
everything.
do, and we can do the charging also.
Yes, you can do charging also. And not only at our charging stations, any other charging stations.
Any other, Okay,
right?
any other charging
Any other
station.
So it was an open loop, purely compliant with the RBI guidelines, issued, managed by the Pine Lab. It's a co-branded card. Pine Lab Glida co-branded card. Besides that, we completely, so far we have done away with the closed loop wallet.
Oh.
But we are giving that options to the fleet operators because they are consuming a lot. So we are giving them the options that if you want, you can put your money in the wallet.
Right.
Because then they have a regular, frequent charging.
Right. And in case of the personal consumers also, Awadhesh Ji, let's say your network becomes one of the largest networks, and I have a pattern that mostly I'm charging at your network. Then I think that option is fine.
Yes. So currently we are not giving the options, but I'm saying that this will be one of the options.
Okay.
This will not be the only way by which you will charge, which many of the CPOs tend to do it. That's where I differ. I say that industry should evolve where customer should be given preference. कि मैं क्रेडिट कार्ड से करना चाहता हूं, मैं डेबिट कार्ड से करना चाहता हूं, मैं क्लोज लूप में करना चाहता हूं, मैं ओपन लूप में करना चाहता हूं. एज ए सीपीओ यू शुड गिव दैट ऑप्शंस, एंड दैट्स व्हाई हम लोगों ने एडहॉक पेमेंट सिस्टम भी बनाया है जो क्यूआर कोड स्कैनिंग बेस्ड है.
राइट,
उसमें आपको कोई रजिस्ट्रेशन करने की जरूरत नहीं है.
ओके.
आपने अगर चार्जिंग डिस्कवर कर ली कि ग्लिडा का चार्जर इस लोकेशन पे है और वहां आपको दिख गया कि वो चार्जर है, तो वहां आके आपको कोई रजिस्ट्रेशन करने की जरूरत नहीं है. किसी भी क्यूआर स्कैनर से आप स्कैन करें, पेमेंट करें और चार्जिंग हो जाएगी. कोई पैसा आपका ब्लॉक नहीं होगा. अगर आपने पेमेंट की 500 रुपये की, चार्जिंग आपकी 400 रुपये की हुई, 100 रुपये आपकी इंस्टेंट रिफंड. तो दीज आर द ऑप्शंस व्हिच सीपीओ शुड गिव. आने वाले समय में व्हाट वी आर एक्सपेरिमेंटिंग नाउ इज दैट हम लोग अब डेबिट कार्ड एंड क्रेडिट कार्ड के सीधे स्वाइपिंग या वो लगाएंगे.
तो सारे ऑप्शंस होने चाहिए.
सारे ऑप्शंस
के पास. ये कंज्यूमर पे है, जरूरी नहीं है कि वो क्यूआर वाला ऑप्शन ही चूज करे.
किसी भी आप देखें, किसी भी ट्रांजैक्शंस में हम और आप जब जाते हैं हमारे पास ऑप्शंस हैं.
यस.
कि मैं उसके वॉलेट में पैसे डाल के करूं,
राइट,
या मैं उनके डायरेक्टली यूपीआई से करूं,
क्रेडिट कार्ड से करूं,
डेबिट कार्ड से करूं. ये ऑप्शंस मेरा है. राइट. ये ऑप्शंस कस्टमर को होना चाहिए.
ये ऑप्शंस देना बहुत डिफिकल्ट तो नहीं है?
कोई डिफिकल्ट नहीं है. कोई डिफिकल्ट नहीं है. इट्स अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ द बिजनेस डिसीजन. राइट. ऑब्वियसली है, ऑप्शंस आप देते हैं तो आपको इंटीग्रेशंस करने पड़ेंगे, एफर्ट लगेंगे. टू दैट एक्सटेंट आपके रिसोर्सेज कंज्यूम होंगे, मैनेज करने पड़ेंगे आपको, बट डिफिकल्ट नहीं है.
ओके.
लेकिन अगर आप इस बिजनेस में हैं जो कि B2C बिजनेस है,
राइट,
काइंड ऑफ B2B2C है या B2C है, ऐसे में कंज्यूमर को प्रेफरेंस होना चाहिए वो किस मेथड से पेमेंट करना चाहते हैं.
राइट. RWA वाले क्वेश्चन पे इफ आई कैन टेक योर ओपिनियन.
हाँ, तो आई एम नॉट अवेयर कि यूरोप में ये राइट टू चार्ज है या नहीं है एज ए लीगल.
ओके.
What I'm aware, especially if I take the example of Norway, तो वहाँ पे जब वो सब्सिडीज देते हैं इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर क्रिएट करने के लिए, वहाँ उनकी बड़ी क्लियर रिक्वायरमेंट होती है कि आप किसी भी कंज्यूमर को डिनाई नहीं कर सकते हैं चार्जिंग का. इट मीन्स वो ये नहीं कह रहे हैं कि आप, बिकॉज वहाँ क्या होता था मॉडल कि लोग को रजिस्ट्रेशन कराना कंपल्सरी था. कि हमारे सिस्टम पे, हमारे ऐप पे आपको रजिस्टर करना होगा. देयर दे सेड कि आप अगर सब्सिडी से चार्जिंग स्टेशन डेवलप कर रहे हैं तो कोई भी बंदा आएगा जो आपका रजिस्टर्ड कस्टमर नहीं है, इवन दे आर सपोज टू गेट द चार्जिंग डन. एंड दैट्स हाउ वी इनोवेटेड द एडहॉक पेमेंट सिस्टम देयर. तो वहां पे हम एसएमएस बेस्ड पेमेंट करते हैं. उसी को हमने यहाँ पे इंडिया में क्यूआर बेस्ड रेप्लिकेट किया है. तो फ्रॉम द डे वन वी वर अवेयर कि कस्टमर की क्या रिक्वायरमेंट होनी चाहिए और रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क आगे आने वाले समय में क्या होगा. This advantage we have being a player in Norway, कि वहां पे जो कस्टमर ने फेस किया है, जो रेगुलेटर ने फेस किया है, वो हम पहले से हमको पता है इंडिया में कि इंडिया में भी आएगा, आज नहीं तो कल आएगा ये. Why don't you prepare yourself today? तो this is something जहाँ पे RWA की हम बात करें, अगर मैं समझता हूँ कि सेफ्टी और सबके इश्यूज, मतलब उनके कंसर्न्स जो हैं, इट्स मोर अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ अवेयरनेस. कि उनको वी हैव इशूड द गाइडलाइंस, हमने महुआ बना दिया, हमने उसमें ये दे दिया कि ठीक है करना है आपको, बट कोई उनसे बात नहीं करता है. वो सीपीओ को आपने छोड़ दिया है बात करने के. आई एम सेइंग दैट्स वेयर जो हम गो इलेक्ट्रिक कैंपेन की बात करते हैं, ये सब कैंपेन में आप RWA को बुलाइए ना. आप किसको बुला रहे हैं?
राइट.
आप बुला रहे हैं सीपीओज को, आप बुला रहे हैं डिस्कॉम्स को. गो इलेक्ट्रिक कैंपेन शुड हैपन एट द RWA लेवल.
राइट.
गवर्नमेंट के तरफ से कम्युनिकेशंस होनी चाहिए. वो उनको ऑथेंटिक लगेगा.
Right, I think that awareness information is really very important. Let's say, for example, if I am the chairman of the RWA of my society, I think I will also personally will go for this opinion only, that let's have community charging so that we can have better control. Otherwise, everybody will complain about everyone else that there are issues being created at individual level. But I think once they are more aware, probably that there may or may not be safety security challenges, then I think that is a better way of handling.
So apart from that awareness, जो एक और awareness जरूरी है वो पॉलिसी लेवल पे, वो ये कि क्या हम इंडिविजुअल चार्जर्स जाएं या कम्युनिटी चार्जिंग है. Considering, I mean, this is our view, the Glida's view is that considering the kind of infrastructure we have, electricity infrastructure I'm talking about, and the financial situations most of the discoms have, I don't think it is wise or prudent to develop a parallel infrastructure in every RWAs. within the same infrastructure or with the minor augmentations, the community charging will take place, much better way, much efficient way than the individual charging.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, maintaining that and
Not only maintenance. See, मैं maintenance सबके point of view से नहीं देख रहा हूँ.
Okay.
मैं इसको देख रहा हूँ overall national power system के point of view से.
Okay.
So, अब take एक example लीजिए.
Please.
So let's say there is a 100 inmate societies.
Okay.
100 flats हैं उसमें.
Okay.
Each flat has roughly around 7 to 10 kilowatt of domestic load.
Yeah.
तो एक MVA का ट्रांसफार्मर आपने लगाया हुआ है.
Yes.
Right? Now you want every 100, let's say 100 families के पास 100 इलेक्ट्रिक कार आ गई.
Yes.
अब आपने 7 किलोवाट या 11 किलोवाट के होम चार्जर आप लगाओगे.
Yes.
So it means you are talking of another 1 MVA of transformer.
Yes.
इस ट्रांसफार्मर से तो होगा नहीं.
No, not
तो आप you will create another 1 MVA of transformer. Now this will take resource. अब चाहे रिसोर्स सरकार दे, चाहे कंज्यूमर पे करे, बट somebody has to pay that resource. Now how this resource will be utilized? रात में तो चार्ज होगी, दिन में ये सारे एसेट्स खाली पड़े रहेंगे. और हमारी जो रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क है, हम इसमें इस लोड को कहीं और ट्रांसफर भी नहीं कर सकते हैं, बिकॉज ये कॉन्ट्रैक्टेड लोड ऑलरेडी है डोमेस्टिक पे. तो 50% of the time or 60% of the time, this asset which you have created by additional funding is lying unutilized. Whereas existing जो ट्रांसफार्मर्स हैं, उसको भी अगर आप देखेंगे, तो उसमें भी 50% ऑफ द टाइम ओवरऑल देखेंगे अगर आप, तो लोड नहीं रहती है, बिकॉज दिन के टाइम में लोड नहीं रहती है. सो देयर आई एम सेइंग कि आप वहां पे कम्युनिटी चार्जिंग वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट है, और अलॉन्ग विद द डायनामिक लोड बैलेंसिंग, कि जब उसमें लोड कम हुआ, आप
स्टार्ट कर
ईवी पे चार्जिंग पे स्टार्ट कर दो, जब लोड बढ़ा तो डोमेस्टिक को प्रेफरेंस दे दो. तो डायनामिक लोड बैलेंसिंग सिस्टम्स अलॉन्ग विद कम्युनिटी चार्जिंग शुड बी द वे फॉरवर्ड फॉर अ कंट्री लाइक इंडिया. हम यूरोप नहीं है,
राइट,
जहां पे हर घर में पावर पॉइंट पहले से लगा हुआ है, बिकॉज मोस्ट ऑफ द यूरोपियन कंट्रीज आर कोल्ड कंट्रीज, उनको हीटिंग रिक्वायरमेंट है, तो उनके पास सिस्टम्स ऑलरेडी बने हुए हैं. हमारे यहाँ नहीं है. तो हमारे यहाँ ये बहुत जरूरी है, जो हमारा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, जो हमारी अपनी फाइनेंशियल कैपेबिलिटीज है, उसके मद्देनजर हमको स्कीम बनानी चाहिए.
राइट.
इसीलिए मैं कभी भी इस फेवर में नहीं रहता हूँ कि OEM होम चार्जर बेचे. मैं इसके फेवर में नहीं रहता हूँ. सरकार सबको खुलेआम बोले कि मैं डिस्कॉम जो है 3.3 या 7 किलोवाट के चार्जर घर में कनेक्शंस दे. आई एम नॉट इन फेवर ऑफ दैट, बिकॉज यू स्टार्ट थिंकिंग फ्रॉम द नेशनल सिस्टम्स. और OEM कार चार्जर ना बेचे, उसका बड़ा सिंपल सा रीजन है कि आप कहते हो कि पब्लिक चार्जिंग नहीं है, इसलिए मैं कार नहीं बेच पाता हूँ. और पब्लिक चार्जिंग इसलिए नहीं लग पा रही है क्योंकि आप तो सारे कंज्यूमर को घर में चार्जिंग करा रहे हो.
करेक्ट.
तो जब सारे चार्जिंग घर में कराओगे आप, तो पब्लिक चार्जिंग पे तो चार्जर होंगी नहीं. अगर वो बिजनेस वायबल नहीं होगा, तो पब्लिक चार्जिंग में लोग इन्वेस्ट क्यों करेंगे? सो दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच एज ए स्टेक होल्डर OEM also has to think that how far they will go and sell this home charging.
That is OEM decision. Maybe consumers, they want to make consumers very happy about it. So I think we discussed about policies, which are really very, very important, and then we also understood the issues about consumers and what are the choices and challenges they have. Then I think we also need to understand about the competition. When I say the competition, it's not only about the CPOs, it's about other stakeholders and how they are contributing in the entire ecosystem, and how probably CPOs can be one of the as you mentioned, right, better place to address entire challenges rather than a mobility player. If you can give some opinion on that.
So competition से आपका मतलब चार्जिंग इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के लिए या
चार्जिंग इंफ्रा से, चार्जिंग इंफ्रा के इकोसिस्टम.
So देखिए, obviously when you have any new technology coming in,
right,
and especially if the entry barrier is less, तो competition तो बढ़ेंगे, and it's good for the market also, good for the consumer also. But over a period of time, the market will ultimately consolidate. ऐसा हो नहीं सकता है कि आप एक चार्जर लेके या 5 चार्जर्स लेके आप लगातार बिजनेस करते रहोगे. So there would be consolidation coming in at some point of time.
Yes.
But at this stage, I would say we are not much worried about the competitions. We are more concerned about the collaborations.
Okay.
That people should collaborate. Even the two CPOs has to collaborate. CPO and the MSP has to collaborate. CPO and OEM has to collaborate. CPO and Discoms has to collaborate. So we should collaborate and we should leverage each other's strength. हम एक दूसरे के वीकनेस को सप्लीमेंट करें. अब CPO की वीकनेस क्या है? इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर तो लगा दे रहा है, यूटिलाइजेशन नहीं हो रही है.
Yes.
अगर यूटिलाइजेशन नहीं होगी तो उसको कैसे बढ़ाएं? This should be the collective thinking, right? तो वो कैसे बढ़ेगी? So OEMs has to come forward, put more cars.
Yes.
Fleet has to be augmented.
Yes.
So and then distribution company has to give the electricity, in time.
Yeah.
So these are the different ways by which collaborations can happen. Competition, at this stage is not a, I would say the larger concern.
Yeah, in this industry, I think it can flourish on collaboration model rather than competing, especially at this point in time.
Because especially ये दो चीज आप ध्यान रखें कि ये intersections है transportation and energy.
Yeah.
Unlike gasoline, it's a intersections of the transportation and energy, because हम अगर सस्टेनेबिलिटी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से बात करें, हम बात करते हैं कि ये रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी होना चाहिए, बट रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी आप जितना जनरेट करेंगे उतनी वेरिएबिलिटी सिस्टम में बढ़ेगी. Then there should be system to absorb it.
Right.
Electric vehicle with a battery,
right,
most of the time sitting idle. ये तो perfect supplement है आपके लिए, complement है आपके लिए, कि आप इसको एक्सेस जनरेशन को इसमें स्टोर करें और रात को ग्रिड में जाके इसको डिस्चार्ज करें. स्टेबिलिटी. तो हमें वो जो रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क है कि कैसे ये सिस्टम को मैं लेवरेज करके, तो वहां पे डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन कंपनीज का भी रोल आएगा, यहाँ पे जनरेटर का भी रोल आएगा, ऑटोमोबाइल कंपनी का रोल आएगा, बिकॉज द बैटरी हैज टू बी बाई डायरेक्शनल. सो दिस इज परफेक्ट एग्जांपल जहाँ पे कि कोलैबोरेशंस के बिना डिफिकल्ट है. कंपटीशन होगी, अपने अपने क्षेत्र में सबकी कंपटीशन होगी, सबका अपना यूनिक सेलिंग पॉइंट्स होते हैं, बट आपको ओवरऑल कोलैबोरेशंस करना पड़ेगा डायरेक्शनली इसको आगे ले जाने के लिए.
राइट. Sir, last time when we spoke, we also spoke about in one of the platforms about investment trends. And then I talked about, when I was tracking the investments in, and I compared for different other countries also, but in India, investment trends is much better for infrastructure business rather than other parts of the value chain. So what is your opinion around it? Do you foresee in future also invest? Because in my personal opinion, if I may say, I see another 3 to 5 years, majority of the actions or a lot of action is going to happen around charging infrastructure business, including investments. So do you think investments are not a problem, or what is the investment trend in charging infra part?
See, as far as investment is concerned, obviously being a new technology, which is still evolving, because battery itself is evolving. जैसे जैसे बैटरी इवॉल्व होगी वैसे वैसे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इवॉल्व होगी. राइट. सो दिस स्पेस रिक्वायर्स इन्वेस्टमेंट्स एंड ह्यूज अमाउंट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट्स. राइट. उसके बिना तो हो नहीं सकता. सी, गवर्नमेंट कैन सपोर्ट द सेक्टर टू अ सर्टेन एक्सटेंट.
यस.
जैसे फेम 2 में या फिर पीएमई ड्राइव में गवर्नमेंट इज सपोर्टिंग बाय 1000 करोड़, 2000 करोड़, 3000 करोड़ सपोर्ट करती है इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर क्रिएट करने के लिए, बट द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर उस 3000 करोड़ से होने वाला नहीं है, व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट द मास एडॉप्शंस. सो स्पेस रिक्वायर्स अ ह्यूज अमाउंट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट्स, एंड सिंस दिस इज अ बिजनेस ऑफ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इन नेचर, so this space requires an investments from which has a long duration maturity. It's not a investment which requires to be done in 2 years time, कि आप 2 साल में रिटर्न ढूंढना शुरू करेंगे. So this requires a different kind of nature. That's why I say that it is an infrastructure space, right? An infrastructure funds and the long-term funds that requires to come into this picture. Globally, this is happening, and we expect that in India also, because initially तभी छोटे-छोटे इन्वेस्टमेंट की जरूरत पड़ रही है आपको, but जब आप लॉन्ग टर्म की बात करते हैं, you require a huge capital here, which is coming to India. Obviously, investment in any sector is interplay of many things,
right,
and that's where I look at it from the investor's point of view, is that you have a very stable policies. So EV को adoptions करने के लिए जो policies होनी चाहिए वो गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने ऑलरेडी प्लेस में रखे हुए हैं. स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स हैज also giving those supports. So from the policy point of view, it's more or less stable, right? It's a very positive looking that. Now, as I said again, if you add this kind of a service fee cap, that brings certain element of uncertainty in the mind of the investors, right. That अगर वो कैप लग गया तो क्या होगा, किसी को मालूम नहीं कि उसका इम्पैक्ट कैसे होगा, बिकॉज अब कैप का कम है ज्यादा है कैसे होगा. So you remove those kind of an uncertainty, then the market is ripe for attracting good investments, right? अभी OEM के साथ investments हो रही हैं, because OEM sector is more or less evolved.
Yeah.
वहाँ पे रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क क्लियर हैं,
Yes.
तो वहाँ पे चीजें हो रही हैं. इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में ये होना है. The one aspect which I require from the government, इसमें और अट्रैक्शन लाने के लिए, that this space should be accorded infrastructure status.
Okay.
इस इंडस्ट्री को भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्टेटस नहीं दिया गया है.
Okay.
You know, we consider it as an infrastructure, but जब आप इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्टेटस गवर्नमेंट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से कंसिडर करते हैं, then it brings a lot of fiscal और नॉन फिजिकल इंसेंटिव्स और बेनिफिट्स. यू नो, जो टैक्स में इंफॉर्मेशन होती है, रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट, आप जब लेंडिंग लेते हो तो उसमें भी आपको प्रेफरेंशियल रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट मिलती है. सो दिस सेगमेंट रिक्वायर्स इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्टेटस, एंड दैट्स व्हाई आई ऑलवेज से दैट द गवर्नमेंट की जो भी अपने कंस्ट्रेंट्स हैं, दे शुड नॉट बी इनटू द बिजनेस ऑफ सेटिंग अप द चार्जिंग इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. उनको उस पैसे को लेके जो भी 3,000 करोड़ 2,000 करोड़ आप लगाना चाहते हैं, you create the upstream electricity infrastructure जहाँ पे plug and play हो, instead of going and setting up, you know, low cost chargers at a different places. कितना परफॉर्म करेगा, you know, somebody has to do the audit for that one also, right? कि वो audit and not of the investment, audit of the performance of those chargers. We should do it, right? Because consumer के लिए वो chargers चलने चाहिए.
Right.
तो आपको वहां जाने के बजाय, I would say that आप create the upstream infrastructure which is be beneficial for anyone. You know, चाहे PSUs हो, चाहे private हो, इनको advantage होगा. So this is what the investment requires in this space.
Okay, great. And Awadhesh, you mentioned many times, I think, in most of the questions, I think the numbers are really important in industry, right? I was looking at the number 7,500 cars per month. I was tracking the last few months numbers. So with the 7,500 cars, and if you compare it with the infrastructure rate at which it is developing, I think we need more and more cars. So one is like you have the new cars, new models, introductions which are already happening, but that still is like 2% penetration. But we need more and more cars. Unlike what we have in the traditional industry, second-hand car market, which is a very, very big, and in recent past you will see all the OEMs are focusing on that kind of market. But in EVs, that's not happening. That also hinders the investments. Lending, the lending rates go very high, mainly because of that, because second-hand market is not developing. People are not getting actual prices what they should get after 5 years if they want to sell. So any opinion on that? Because it has the potential to increase entire units in operations.
I'm a strong proponent that why EV should not have a good rising or a thriving second-hand market. I can understand that in initial lot of the vehicles, people might not have the confidence. Because see, ultimately from the consumer point of view, जब मैं second hand खरीदने जाता हूँ, तो मैं क्या देखता हूँ? Obviously price देखूंगा, but हमें ये भी देखना है कि इस परफॉर्मेंस कैसी होगी. तो important element क्या है? Battery. So I strongly believe that car OEMs, the way things are moving now, they have now better hold on the battery. They understand the battery now much better.
Yes.
And incidentally, in India, if you see, most of the legacy companies are into the EV cars.
Yes.
कोई unlike Europe या in US जहाँ पे Tesla आज नया कंपनी शुरू हुआ था, यहाँ पे कोई नया कंपनी तो शुरू नहीं हुआ है. सभी established companies हैं, चाहे वो टाटा हो, महिंद्रा हो, MG हो, सब नए established companies हैं.
All of them.
And they generally have their own second hand car business also. उनके ही यहाँ से उनका जैसे महिंद्रा का फर्स्ट चॉइस है, तो जहाँ पे वो सेकंड हैंड कार सेल करते हैं. So they have a control on the battery. They understand the battery. They can give the confidence if they start giving a good price for those. तो ये जब तक सेकंड हैंड मार्केट नहीं बनेगा, तो क्या होगा कि जो एंट्री लेवल के प्लेयर्स हैं, जो अभी 2 व्हीलर से 4 व्हीलर्स पे आना चाहते हैं, वो इलेक्ट्रिक पे नहीं जाएगा, क्योंकि उसको अभी भी नया व्हीकल की कॉस्ट बहुत ज्यादा लगती है और सेकंड हैंड व्हीकल ऑफर नहीं है at the right price. ठीक है. कस्टमर के पास भी ऑप्शंस नहीं है, जो ओन कर रहा है उसके पास ऑप्शंस नहीं है कहाँ जाके बेचे इसको, because it has not been developed so far. So I think जब तक सेकंड हैंड मार्केट में एक बहुत बड़ा अपॉर्चुनिटीज है इंडिया में उस इकोसिस्टम को डेवलप करने का. Obviously volume will play an important, but then incidentally I would expect these legacy companies to start valuing it much better and then offering it to the, they can do all the refurbishing, whatever it is required, and then they can sell it to the ये स्पेस को इवॉल्व होना बहुत जरूरी है इफ यू वांट टू रीच आउट टू द मास मार्केट वेरी क्विकली. Otherwise, organically, it will take more time.
Yeah, because it's, let's say, 8 years is the warranty period. And after 8 years, consumer needs to replace the batteries. So generally, it kind of, if you replace the battery is like 50% of the cost of the vehicle. Then it's a huge cost.
मैं इसमें थोड़ा सा मैं सहमत नहीं हूँ. देखिए 8 साल की वारंटी है और 1.5 लाख किलोमीटर की वारंटी है. OEM ये नहीं कभी कहता है कि आपको बैटरी बदलनी है. ये हमारा कंजंक्चर है.
Yes.
हम एज ए कंज्यूमर हम ये सोच रहे हैं कि हमको बदलने की जरूरत है. अगेन यहाँ पे मैं कह रहा हूँ कि OEMs should give this kind of right information. And that's why this second hand market, because second hand market जब आप करते हो तो you are giving that confidence. तो I am not sure that after 8 years या 1.5 लाख किलोमीटर के बाद में आपको बैटरी बदलनी जरूरी है. Yes, there could be some performance constraints कि बैटरी आपकी 300 किलोमीटर की जगह पे 200 किलोमीटर की रेंज देगी, बट यू माइट नॉट रिक्वायर टू रिप्लेस द बैटरी. तो एक तो ये मुझे लगता है ये मिसकंसेप्शन है कि वारंटी को हम ये कंफ्यूज करके चल रहे हैं, ये लाइफ ऑफ द बैटरी. दैट इज अ वारंटी. जैसे आपके व्हीकल में आप कोई भी व्हीकल खरीदते हो या आप मोबाइल खरीदते हो तो कहते हैं कि आपको इतने दिन की वारंटी है. इट डजंट मीन दैट उसकी लाइफ खत्म हो गई. फ्रिज आप खरीदते हो तो कितने साल की वारंटी मिलती है? 1 साल की वारंटी मिलती है. इसका मतलब 1 साल की लाइफ है उसकी. वो तो शायद 10 साल चलती है. राइट. हो सकता है कूलिंग थोड़ी सी कम हो जाती हो जाए. तो ऐसी वारंटी है ये. इट्स नॉट द लाइफ ऑफ द बैटरी. तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशंस हैं जो हम लोग राइट तरीके से कम्युनिकेट नहीं करते हैं.
सो फॉर एग्जांपल सर, लेट्स से कि हमारे पास भी गाड़ी है. इफ आई एम रनिंग इट, लेट्स से 8-9 साल तक मैंने गाड़ी चला ली, देन आई विल डेफिनेटली नॉट टेक दैट. माय यूसेज पैटर्न विल चेंज. या वो सेकेंड हैंड मार्केट में जाएगी एंड समबडी हु रिक्वायर्स डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ यूसेज ऑफ द व्हीकल विल बाय. वैसा कुछ ईवी में भी
मैं भी करूँ. सेकेंड हैंड मार्केट देखिए, ये आपको देखना पड़ेगा. सेकेंड हैंड मार्केट नॉर्मली 10 साल के बाद कोई गाड़ी बेचता है वो बहुत कम है. Normally people change their vehicles 5 years 6 years time पे, and that's how second market evolves.
Yes.
Right, क्योंकि vehicle का भी life है, vehicle अभी performance कर रही है. When it comes to the EV, again I've seen that options देना है लोगों को.
Options
कि 5 साल के बाद अगर मुझे गाड़ी बदलनी है, because EV में क्या है, वेरिएंट बदलते जा रहे हैं. तो अगर आपने आज मान लीजिए कोई कस्टमर है जो टाटा नेक्सॉन का पहला वेरिएंट खरीदा. अब टाटा ने कई सारे वेरिएंट टाटा नेक्सॉन के ले आए. अब उसको नया वेरिएंट अगर खरीदना है, नाउ ही इज स्टक, बिकॉज जो पुराने व्हीकल का क्या करे. उसकी तभी 4 साल लाइफ हुई है.
Right.
4 साल में आपने इतनी टेक्नोलॉजी चेंज कर दी. ही इज स्टक विद द ओल्ड टेक्नोलॉजी. बट देयर वुड बी सम consumer who is willing to buy that technology also.
Right.
But if they get at the right price and an assurance that this vehicle will perform,
right.
वो कौन करेगा? तो जो vehicle manufacturers है, they can do it. Or someone who understands the battery. तो EV market में जो बैटरी को बढ़िया से समझता है, so he can always diagnose the battery and then take a call that yes, this is something which we will do. So that is the point I am saying कि ये बहुत जरूरी है कि इसको आप जब तक ये नहीं करोगे, आप वेट करोगे 8 साल 9 साल 10 साल, कोई 10 साल तो कोई व्हीकल रखता नहीं है. तो सेकेंडरी मार्केट आप जैसे 5 साल में बदलेंगे तो दैट पर्सन विल गो फॉर अ न्यू कार. और एक चीज है ईवी के साथ में कि ईवी में एक बार आपने अगर ड्राइव कर ली तो जनरली पीपल हैव सीन कि वो दूसरे कार पे नहीं जाते हैं, आइस कार पे नहीं जाते हैं.
Right.
They will go for a better car on the EV segment itself. तो ये आपकी वेलोसिटी बढ़ाएगी, वॉल्यूम बढ़ाएगी. तो वेलोसिटी लाना बहुत जरूरी है. उसके लिए सेकेंडरी जो सेकेंड हैंड कार है उसकी मार्केट को बढ़ाना बहुत जरूरी है.
Thank you very much, Awadhesh ji. I mean, we discussed about policies, we discussed about consumer issues, the competition, need of second-hand market, and investment trends, etc. I think closing the session is always very challenging when we discuss somebody like Awadhesh ji, but I think we will take a pause here and welcome you in future sessions.
Thank you.
Awadhesh ji, in case you have some concluding remarks or any other policy suggestions or something.
No, thank you, Pratesh. I think for having me here. This is always, I have always been talking to you in various forums, various conferences, and I find you. So I wish you all the best with this. I would say the effort which you are doing with this venture which you have started, because in India we require a good awareness. EV is a new. People need to know because unlike the petrol vehicles or diesel vehicles, यहाँ पे बैटरी कार में है, and battery being battery, customer should know their asset, right? So I say that I always call it KYC, so know your car. तो ये EV में बहुत जरूरी है कि आपको कार को समझना बहुत जरूरी है. तो इसमें जिस तरह के एफर्ट आप लगा रहे हैं, और भी लोगों को इसकी जरूरत है कि आप अवेयरनेस को बढ़ाएं. So I wish you all the best. This is a fantastic initiative which you have taken, and I'm honored that you invited me here.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, and keep watching this space for more and more episodes around charging infrastructure. During next few episodes, I'm going to deep dive around, how the manufacturing is happening, what are other parts of the value chain, how government thinks about this industry. More than that, how influencers and consumers are viewing this industry. And once we conclude this series, I think we can have a very consolidated view which can be useful for different stakeholders. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.